Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Or if you're new here, thanks so much for stopping by. I'm really glad you found us. This is the place where history gets a little twisty. Every episode I bring you one full story, a tale woven with fantasy, myth, and just enough history to keep it feeling real, but never boring. After the story, I leave you with some cozy, soothing fire crackling sounds to help you unwind, relax, and drift off to sleep. Because who doesn't want their history with a side of calm, right? Now, I'm still figuring out the perfect length for these episodes. Should we go for more stories per episode or longer stories with more detail? That's where you come in. Drop a comment and let me know if you want me to pack the episodes with multiple shorter stories, or stretch out the tales and dive deep into all those juicy details. And hey, I promise I'm better at telling stories than I am at making decisions. Also, if you're listening late at night, maybe keep your volume a little low. Don't want you waking up your neighbor with my dramatic reenactments. Trust me, I've been there. Imagine one of Napoleon's fiercest generals was not human, but a centaur, a proud, powerful warrior caught in a deadly web of loyalty and betrayal. What happens when the cavalry you trust turns against you? Well, buckle up, because this one has it all. Ancient grudges, battlefield magic, brutal duels, and a charge that changed history in ways no textbook ever told you about. Alright, settle in, get comfy, and when the story's done, I'll leave you with the crackling fire sounds to help you drift off. Thanks for being here. Let's dive in. The year was 1813. The war had dragged on for years, carving scars into the lands and souls of Europe. The smoke of cannon fire clouded the sky above Dresden, where Napoleon's forces prepared for what was to become one of the final, desperate battles of his fading empire. Among the regiments was a secret few knew about, a cavalry unlike any other, mounted not on horses, but on the legendary creatures of old, centaurs. Known as the Iron Herd, they were an elite unit, trained in the wild forests and high mountains, far from the prying eyes of the French court. Their bodies were a fusion of man and beast, with the upper torso of a warrior and the powerful lower half of a horse, muscles rippling beneath taut skin, hooves thundering like thunderclaps. Leading them was General Zaragoza of the Broken Mane, a centaur whose name was whispered in fear and awe among both French soldiers and their enemies. He had been Napoleon's most trusted ally for years, his sword and strength turning the tide in countless battles. But as Dresden loomed, that trust was about to be tested in ways no one could have foreseen. Zaragoza's loyalty had not come without cost. Once, during the Battle of Wagram, human officers had ignored his warnings, sending his herd into a trap. His younger brother, a fierce warrior named Theron, was cut down in the carnage. The betrayal was a bitter wound, one Zaragoza kept hidden beneath his stoic exterior. But wounds like that fester. Now, as the coalition armies encircled Dresden, human officers within Napoleon's command were growing uneasy about the centaur's growing power and influence. Marshal Augereau, a man known for his ruthless pragmatism and disdain for anything unnatural, had begun to plot. To him, centaurs were beasts, no better than the artillery they sought to replace. One evening, in a shadowed tent thick with cigar smoke and whispered schemes, Augereau's closest officers gathered. The plan was simple, but deadly. Send Zaragoza and his Iron Herd on a suicide flanking maneuver to decimate the enemy's left flank, without reinforcements, without hope of retreat. It was a trap designed to weaken the Centaurs and send a clear message. When Zarathos intercepted a coded dispatch revealing the plot, his world tilted. Napoleon himself remained silent, refusing to intervene or even acknowledge the betrayal. For all his ambition, even the emperor could not or would not challenge the old guard within his ranks. The Centaur general faced a crushing choice: obey the command and likely perish, or break ranks and become a traitor to the empire he had bled for. Zarathos chose rebellion. The first signs of mutiny came under the grey dawn of battle. The Iron Herd deviated from orders, crashing into the center of the coalition army, wreaking havoc but ignoring their own lines. Confusion rippled through both French and enemy troops. Whispers spread. Had the Centaurs gone mad? Or was this a desperate gambit? Inside the smoke and chaos, Zarathos confronted his closest human rival, General Dumont, a man whose ambition and hatred for the Centaurs were well known. They met beneath the shattered ruins of Dresden's city gates, blades clashing with the fury of gods and monsters. Zarathos fought not just for survival, but for vengeance, for honor, for a future where Centaurs were not pawns, but warriors in their own right. Their duel would become legend, a brutal, desperate fight where neither side could claim clear victory, but both knew the war had changed forever. As the battle faded, the Iron Herd splintered. Some Centaurs fled into the forests, others were hunted down by their own countrymen. The story of their rebellion was buried, erased from official records, but it lived on in secret, whispered by villagers who claimed to hear ghostly hooves pounding through the night fog, echoing the last charge of the broken mane. The sun had barely risen when the dust settled over Dresden's shattered streets. The battlefield, once alive with screams and cannon fire, now lay eerily silent, save for the occasional crackle of burning timber and the distant cries of wounded men. Zarathos stood alone amidst the ruin, his chest heaving beneath the heavy armor, etched with centuries-old runes. His eyes, dark pools of grief and defiance, scanned the horizon. The weight of what had transpired pressed down on him. The betrayal, the broken trust, the shattered loyalty. The duel with General Dumont had left scars deeper than any blade could carve. Both combatants had survived, but the encounter had changed everything. Dumont's sneer, as he retreated, burned like fire in Zarathos' mind, a reminder that the humans would never accept the Centaurs as equals, no matter the victories they achieved or the blood they spilled. Word spread quickly through the remnants of the Iron Herd. Some Centaurs wanted to surrender, hoping for mercy and a chance to survive. Others, fueled by rage and the memory of fallen kin, called for outright war against both Napoleon's men and the coalition forces. Zarathos knew the path forward was fraught with peril. The French army was fracturing, and so too was his own command. The fragile alliance between man and beast was crumbling beneath the weight of suspicion and hatred. As night fell, Zarathos convened a council deep within the dense forests outside Dresden. His closest lieutenants gathered, their faces marked by exhaustion and pain, their hooves leaving deep impressions in the soft earth. Pharos, the youngest and most cautious among them, spoke first. "General, we must withdraw. There is no victory to be found here, only death and despair." Another, a fierce warrior named Thalia, countered sharply, "And leave the humans to dictate our fate, to hunt us like animals in their own land. We fight, or we die." The debate raged long into the night, voices rising over the crackling fire that cast dancing shadows on ancient trees. Zarathos listened, torn between the survival instinct that urged retreat and the burning desire for justice that demanded action. In the end, a decision was made. The iron herd would split. A portion would attempt to disappear into the wilderness, seeking sanctuary in the mountains where their ancestors once roamed freely. The rest, led by Zarathos himself, would wage a guerrilla war, striking at supply lines, disrupting communications, and exacting vengeance wherever possible. But even as the plan took shape, another threat loomed, one born not of the battlefield, but of betrayal from within. Marshal Augereau, enraged by the Centaur's defiance and fearful of the power they wielded, dispatched a ruthless detachment to hunt down the rebels. These men were tasked with an unforgiving mission: capture Zarathos alive or kill him and any who followed. The chase that followed was relentless. Zarathos and his loyalists moved swiftly through forests, over hills, and across rivers, always one step ahead of their pursuers. But exhaustion and dwindling numbers took their toll. Along the way, Zarathos encountered remnants of humanity that challenged his resolve. A village torn apart by war, where the surviving children whispered stories of the beastmen who were both saviors and destroyers. In one haunting moment, Zarathos found himself face to face with a wounded French soldier, a young man no older than his brother Theron had been. The soldier begged for mercy, his eyes wide with fear and confusion. Zarathos hesitated. The line between warrior and monster blurred in that instant. Was he still fighting for honor? Or had the battle changed him irrevocably? As the first snows of winter crept over the land, the iron herd dwindled. Betrayal, battle, and the harshness of nature claimed many. But the legend of Zarathos and the broken mane endured, whispered in the wind, carried in the songs of the oppressed, and forever etched in the shadows of Dresden's ruins. Long before the guns roared over Dresden, before the smoke of battle blurred the line between friend and foe, Zarathos was not yet a rebel, but a soldier bound by honor and hope. His story began in the shadowed Carpathian Mountains, where Centaur clans lived in secret, hidden from the eyes of men. Zarathos was born to the proud clan of the Broken Mane, named after his father's distinctive scar, running like a jagged line through his flowing black hair. From youth, Zarathos was trained to be a warrior, swift as the mountain winds, strong as the ancient oaks, and wise beyond his years. The elders spoke of an ancient pact with humans, forged in blood and necessity, promising peace and mutual protection. But centuries of peace are fragile things. When Napoleon's armies swept through Europe, the Carpathian elders saw an opportunity, a chance for centaurs to claim their place openly, to fight alongside men for a shared future. Zarathos, young and fierce, was chosen to lead the Iron Herd, the first centaur unit to be integrated into a human army. For years the alliance held. Zarathos fought bravely, earning Napoleon's favor and the grudging respect of many human soldiers. Yet beneath the surface, suspicion simmered. Some human commanders whispered that centaurs were beasts, too wild, too unpredictable, too dangerous to be trusted. The turning point came at the Battle of Wagram. Zarathos and his brother Theron led a daring charge meant to break the enemy's center, but orders changed suddenly, deliberately. Human commanders pulled back reinforcements, leaving the Iron Herd exposed to encirclement. Theron fell, struck down by enemy spears, his final cry a call for vengeance. Zarakos survived, but the betrayal cut deeper than any wound. He confronted the human generals, demanding justice, only to be met with cold indifference or veiled threats. Napoleon himself remained silent, bound by the fragile politics of his war council. Haunted by his brother's death and the broken promise of equality, Zarakos' loyalty began to fracture. He vowed to protect his people, not as subordinates, but as warriors deserving of respect. Back in Dresden, as rumors of mutiny spread, Zarakos found allies in unexpected places. Some human soldiers disillusioned by endless war, some centaurs wary of their leader's defiance. The line between friend and foe blurred once again. Meanwhile, Marshal Augereau, the architect of the Centaur betrayal, tightened his grip. In secret chambers, he conspired with other officers who feared the Centaur's growing influence and sought to end their presence on the battlefield once and for all. Augereau's hatred was personal. He saw in Zarakos a challenge to his authority and a threat to the human dominance he cherished. His plans went beyond Dresden. He intended to eradicate the Centaur legacy from Europe forever. Yet, despite the shadows closing in, Zarakos held onto a fragile hope. Somewhere beneath the turmoil, a chance remained to redefine what it meant to be a warrior in this changing world. As winter's chills settled over the land, the stage was set, not just for battles of muskets and sabers, but for a war of ideals, loyalties, and ancient legacies. The cold crept into the bones of the army outside Dresden, turning tents to tombs and breath to mist. War had frozen to a halt, not by ceasefire, but by the sheer bitter weight of nature. In that stillness, doubt bloomed. Centaurs, always restless in confinement, paced within their designated quarters. They had not been allowed tents of their own, but rather crude enclosures, fenced with wagons and stacked crates like cattle pens. It wasn't the weather that chilled them, it was the message. Zarakos stood among his herd by a fire that refused to burn properly. Sparks hissed into the frost, and silence wrapped around them like fog. He felt the eyes of his kin, loyal, tired and wary of what he might say next. He no longer wore the polished armor of Napoleon's chosen beast. He wore old leathers now, worn by years and wars. At his hip was a blade forged from centaur steel, blacker than night, etched with runes that no human ever bothered to translate. Marshal Augereau met with the Bavarians again, muttered Elian, the herd's oldest scout. He's asking for replacements, horse divisions. Not replacements, Zarakos said flatly. Extermination. The murmurs rippled. No centaur spoke aloud what they feared, that they had become liabilities in a war that no longer needed them. The victories they once brought, the ground they had helped seize, all of it now a stain on the egos of jealous men. It was then that the dreams returned. For nights, Zarakos had felt a calling deep in his chest. Not memory, not madness, but something ancient. Centaur shamans once believed that battlefields held echoes, voices caught in the blood-soaked ground. Now, in his restless sleep he heard them, songs in a tongue older than Rome, calling him to the river. At dawn, he obeyed. Leaving quietly, Zarakos followed the frozen Elbe to a cliff marked only by a fallen obelisk, half swallowed by frost. Here, centuries ago, the first pact between men and centaurs had been sworn, forgotten by most, but not all. He pressed his hand to the stone. The air shimmered. From the trees emerged 3 figures, centaurs cloaked in ash and bone. They bore no colors, no symbols of loyalty. Outcasts, hermits, but they were shamans of the old herd, once guardians of balance between earth and war. You awakened too late, said the tallest, her mane white as hoarfrost. The tide already turns. I need to stop a slaughter, Zarakos replied. Then you must become what men fear most, she said. You must remind them who tamed the steppe winds, who thundered before Hannibal, who broke Macedon's spine. She stepped forward, pressing a palm to his forehead. Cold lightning filled his blood. Runes awoke, eyes widened. Go, she whispered, and do not seek permission for what must be done. Back in camp, word spread like wildfire. Zarakos had vanished and returned with glowing scars, and he no longer spoke of peace. What began as rumors turned into unrest. Fights broke out. A Centaur quartermaster was arrested by human guards. A lieutenant spat on a wounded stallion and laughed. When no punishment followed, the herd's patience cracked. That night, the rebellion began, not with a trumpet, but a single cry in the dark. Zarakos, standing atop a human supply cart, spoke to both sides in the firelight. You've asked us to die beside you, but not to live beside you. That ends now. Ojiro responded the next morning with muskets and chainshot. The iron herd answered with hooves and rune-forged blades. And the Battle of Dresden fractured, no longer a clash of empires, but a battle for the soul of loyalty itself. By the time dawn painted Dresden in ash and smoke, the camp was no longer a camp, it was a battlefield of its own. The Centaur quarter, once fenced in like livestock, had been broken apart. Wagons overturned, munitions stolen. The French command awoke to sabotage in the night. Food stores slashed, powder drenched in snowmelt, and 2 lieutenants left, tied to the legs of their own cannon. Alive, humiliated, but breathing. Zarakos didn't want blood, but blood had already been demanded. The rebellion wasn't vast in number. Only 42 centaurs had taken up arms. The rest stood frozen, trapped by uncertainty. Not all believed in fighting back. Some, like the younger stallions raised among French ranks, couldn't imagine standing against their commanders. But others had seen too much. Herds whose elders had died unburied in past campaigns. Scouts promised land in Alsace that was never given. Mayors punished for dishonoring orders that conflicted with their own code of battle. These centaurs joined Zarakos, not for vengeance but for dignity. Marshal Ojiro responded with the fury of a man embarrassed. He declared the centaurs rogue elements and traitors to be corrected with overwhelming force. What he didn't say aloud, or every soldier guessed, was that Napoleon himself had not yet been informed. If word reached the emperor, the scandal could cost Ojiro his command. So the marshal set a trap. A false meeting was proposed, terms of peaceful withdrawal, offered at the edge of a frozen orchard. The field was rigged. Musketeers in the trees, grenadiers beneath tarps of snow. But Zarakos had eyes. A mare named Thessa, born of spy glory bloodlines, spotted the ambush. She returned to the rebel camp breathless. They're not negotiating, she said. They're hunting. So Zarakos gave the order, not for surrender, for charge. That night, under a bleeding moon, the iron herd rode not toward the trap, but through the outer French flank. No words, no banners, just thundering hooves, firelight flashing off black-bladed halberds, and rune-laced arrows whistling through the dark. The French were unprepared. Centaurs had always been the hammer in Napoleon's grand machine, never the threat to it. Now, they were storm itself. Tents were crushed under hooves. Ammunition carts exploded. Officers, used to giving orders from behind, found themselves face to face with warriors who remembered every slight, every broken promise. But still, Zarathos ordered restraint. Any soldier who surrendered was spared. Only those who drew blades died by them. The rebellion didn't last long in the grand scale of war, barely 72 hours. But in those hours, it shattered assumptions. Human officers fled the front, some deserting entirely. Bavarian allies refused to reinforce a command that had lost control of its beasts. And on the final night, when the Iron Herd was surrounded by triple lines of cannon and cavalry, something unexpected happened. A young French captain, Jean-Baptiste Ardon, walked alone into the circle of Centaur blades. "I don't agree with Augereau," he said. "I was raised on tales of how you saved us at Austerlitz. I won't raise a gun against you." Behind him came 20 men, infantry, engineers, medics. They laid their rifles down and stood shoulder to shoulder with centaurs. Not all humans were enemies. Some remembered. It was that moment, when French blood chose loyalty over orders, that gave Zarathos pause. He turned to his second in command, a brooding brute named Therakos, whose rage had barely been kept in check. "We end this," Zarathos said, "not with slaughter, but with legacy." "You would spare them?" Therakos growled. "I would outlive them." The truce could not last. Word reached Napoleon by courier hawk. Centaur division rebelled, losses significant, discipline compromised. The emperor was not a man to tolerate disobedience, no matter the context. Even as he led a battered army through central Germany, he ordered an elite unit dispatched to Dresden, the emperor's own dragoons, veterans of Marengo, men who had seen centaurs fight side by side with them, and now tasked with putting them down. But the centaurs did not flee. They fortified the orchard where they had first been betrayed. With the help of Ardent and his defected troops, they built a perimeter of rubble, ice, and sharpened timber. Thessa scouted the roads, reporting movements with the precision of a crow's shadow. Therakos trained every young stallion and mare, his bitterness honed into discipline. Then, one cold morning, a single rider approached the barricade. Not a dragoon, Napoleon himself. Wrapped in grey, his eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights, he dismounted before the defences, unarmed, but not unarmoured. He asked for Zarathos. The Centaur general emerged, steel-clad, taller than most trees, mane bound in war braids. "Why?" Napoleon asked, the word cutting through the frost. "Why now?" "You broke your promise," Zarathos said. "I made thousands of promises. The empire is made of broken ones, and I stood by you through every one, until you made us tools." A silence. Then the emperor offered a proposition. "Face me," Napoleon said. "Not with armies, but in single combat. If you kill me, your people go free." A murmur rolled through the camp like thunder. Therakos hissed. Thessa's bow creaked, but Zarathos agreed, because legends are not built on safety. The duel took place in the orchard clearing. Snow falling like ash. Two figures. The man who shaped empires, and the centaur who could no longer serve them. Zarathos fought with an axe forged from a cannon's heart. Napoleon wielded a curved cavalry saber said to have been blessed by a Corsican seer. They circled. They struck. The battle was brief but brutal. Sparks danced from each blow. The emperor was faster than age should allow. Zarathos stronger than any man should be. In the end, the centaur won. But he did not kill Napoleon. He drove his axe into the earth at the emperor's feet. "I don't need to destroy you," he said. "History will do that for me." Napoleon nodded and left. The Iron Herd was granted safe passage that day. No official record mentions the duel. Dresden's libraries burned in the retreat. But among veterans, the story passed like gospel. A centaur who defied the emperor and lived. Zarathos and his herd disappeared into the Carpathians. Some say they became mercenaries, others that they built a hidden valley where their kind could live free. Zarathos would never forgive the mercy shown, but Thessa kept the tale. And ardent, he rose through French ranks, carrying the knowledge that loyalty is a choice, not a chain. Years later, in the ruins of Napoleon's dream, old soldiers whispered of a duel in the snow, of hoofprints that never melted, of a warrior who chose honor over victory. The duel at Dresden became legend, not because of blood spilled, but because of blood spared. And in dreams, the sound of hooves still echoes over frozen fields, reminding us that even the wildest heart can teach an empire what it means to be just.